The Grim Reaper is the symbolic embodiment of death, a figure that has haunted human imagination for centuries. Often depicted as a skeletal figure cloaked in black, wielding a large scythe, the Reaper represents the inevitable end that comes for all living things. His role isn't to kill, but to guide souls from the realm of the living to the afterlife, acting as a psychopomp, an escort for the departed. Rooted in medieval European imagery, especially during times of plague and widespread death, the Grim Reaper's scythe reflects the harvesting of souls, much like a farmer reaps crops. Neither evil nor good, the Reaper is impartial, serving as a reminder of life's fragility and the certainty of death's arrival. Psychopomps are beings that guide deceased souls from earth to the afterlife. They can be spirits, angels, demons, deities, or creatures. Their role is to guide the deceased, not to judge them. While there isn't a single early text that defines the Grim Reaper, its origins lie in a convergence of Christian beliefs, classical and medieval literature, and art from the time of the Black Death, and ideas and characters from Celtic, Greek, and other European mythologies. This was blended together to create the death personification that we recognize today. So let us go through each of the different sources and characters that influenced the Grim Reaper, starting with the Bible. In the book of Revelation, death is described as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Each horseman symbolizes a different force that brings destruction and calamity upon the world.
When the Lamb opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth.
The rider is explicitly named Death, representing the concept of mortality and the end of life. Unlike the later Grim Reaper imagery, death in Revelation is not described with specific physical attributes, such as a skeletal figure or a cloak. Following death is Hades, which in Greek mythology is the underworld or the abode of the dead. In the context of Revelation, Hades symbolizes the grave, or the place where the dead reside. The mention of Hades emphasizes that not only does death take life, but it is also accompanied by the realm that receives the souls of the deceased. Death and Hades are granted power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by various means, a sword symbolizing war, famine, plague, and wild beasts. This indicates widespread death and destruction, underscoring the apocalyptic nature of the vision. The depiction of death in Revelation is a powerful and influential one that has contributed to the development of the modern concept of the Grim Reaper. The most iconic image of the Grim Reaper emerged in the 14th century during the period of the Black Death, which devastated Europe and killed a significant portion of its population. The widespread death and suffering led to representations of death in art and literature. This motif began appearing in paintings, murals, and manuscripts. During this time, death was often depicted as a skeletal figure to symbolize the decay of the human body. The scythe, a tool used to harvest crops, became associated with the Grim Reaper to symbolize the harvesting of human souls. The concept of the Grim Reaper is closely tied to the Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, a popular allegory in late medieval European art, literature, and performance. It depicts death as a skeletal figure leading people of all social classes in a dance towards their graves. One of the figures that emerges from this period is the Plague Hag. The Plague Hag is often depicted as an old crone-like woman, with a skeletal or emaciated body and a grotesque appearance, symbolizing decay and death. Her long, disheveled hair and ragged clothing add to her menacing look, reinforcing her association with sickness and filth. Sometimes she carries items like a staff, sickle, or broom, representing her ability to sweep through towns and villages, spreading disease and death. The plague hag's primary role is as a harbinger or spreader of disease, particularly the plague. She is often seen as a supernatural figure who can bring sickness wherever she goes, much like a personification of pestilence. In some legends, she is said to enter homes or walk the streets, marking those who will fall victim to the plague. Just as the Grim Reaper represents the inevitability of death, the plague hag embodies the fear and unpredictability of disease. In certain myths, she is believed to spread disease through touch or even through her breath, leaving death in her wake. With little understanding of germs and viruses, people turn to supernatural explanations for the spread of disease, attributing it to malevolent forces like the plague hag. The Grim Reaper also draws inspiration from Thanatos, the Greek god of non-violent death. Thanatos was often depicted as a winged young man or a skeletal figure holding a sword. Unlike other deities or figures of death who bring fear and terror, Thanatos personifies a more peaceful, inevitable death. He represents a natural passing, often seen as a release rather than something to be feared. Thanatos' primary role in Greek mythology is to bring about peaceful death, meaning he represents the actual moment when life ends. He is the god of death, but his role is largely limited to ending life. Once death occurs, he does not guide souls to the underworld. That role is actually fulfilled by another figure, Charon. Charon is the ferryman of the underworld who transports souls across the river Styx or Acheron into the realm of the dead. Thanatos was seen as a necessary part of existence in Greek culture. Death wasn't viewed solely with fear, but as a natural step in the human journey. Thanatos' calm and peaceful nature reinforced this perspective. In Celtic mythology, there are several references to spirits and deities who guide the dead to the afterlife. While these guides are not typically depicted in the same skeletal form as the Grim Reaper, they serve a similar purpose in escorting souls to their final resting place. The Dullahan is a legendary figure from Irish mythology, known for its terrifying and otherworldly appearance. Often regarded as a type of fairy or supernatural being, the Dullahan is a headless horseman who serves as a harbinger of death, similar to the Grim Reaper. The Dullahan is famously described as a headless rider, often seen on horseback. He carries his own head under one arm while riding a black horse, which moves with unnatural speed. The head itself is said to have a hideous grin that stretches from ear to ear, and its eyes constantly dart about, seeing across vast distances even in the darkest night. The Dullahan typically wears a long black cloak, and in some versions of the myth, he carries a whip made from a human spine. In others, he wields a scythe or axe, emphasizing his role as a death-bringer. These tools, like those of the Grim Reaper, are symbolic of his ability to cut down the living and take their souls. The Dullahan is primarily seen as a death omen. When he rides through towns or the countryside, it is said that someone is about to die. He will often stop riding and call out the name of the person whose life he is about to claim. Upon hearing their name, the person dies instantly. In many stories, the Dullahan drives a black coach known as the Death Coach. The coach is often pulled by 4 black horses, and its approach is marked by the sound of creaking wheels and galloping hooves. The coach is used to transport the souls of the dead to the afterlife. Once the Dullahan appears with his coach, there is no way to stop him from taking the soul of the person marked for death. The Dullahan is thought to be a personification of death, particularly a sudden or fated death. Like the Grim Reaper, he does not kill, but rather escorts the souls of the dead to the afterlife. His appearance is often associated with the inevitability of death and the belief that no one can outrun their fate. A figure that shares many traits with the Grim Reaper is the Ankou, a mysterious figure from French Breton folklore. The Ankou is commonly depicted as a tall, gaunt figure, sometimes skeletal, wearing a long black cloak and a broad-brimmed hat that conceals his face. Occasionally he is shown as a shadowy figure, or even as a skeleton. He usually wields a scythe, symbolizing his role as a harvester of souls, much like the Grim Reaper. The Ankou is often seen driving a cart pulled by two black horses. The cart makes a distinct, eerie creaking sound as it moves, a signal of his presence. The Ankou's primary function is to collect the souls of the dead and guide them to the afterlife. He does not cause death, but arrives when it is time for someone's soul to depart. One of the key differences between the Ankou and the Grim Reaper is that, according to Breton belief, the last person to die in a parish each year becomes the Ankou for the following year, assuming the role of the Deathbringer for that time. This unique belief emphasizes that death can come to anyone, and each person may play a role in guiding others to the afterlife. Hearing the creaking of the Ankou's cart, or spotting his shadowy figure at night, is considered a sign that someone nearby will soon die. His presence is a direct warning of death's approach, and people often avoid making loud noises or engaging in disrespectful behavior around cemeteries, fearing it could draw the Ankou's attention. It is also said that looking directly at the Ankou can bring bad luck or even cause death, making his presence a terrifying yet inevitable part of life. The Ankou is sometimes accompanied by assistants, silent spirits who help him collect souls. These figures are often depicted as ghostly or shadowy entities that travel with the Ankou as he makes his rounds. In many stories, the Ankou is a fairly neutral figure, performing his duty without malice or pleasure, simply doing what must be done. In others, his image is more terrifying, especially when death comes unexpectedly or tragically. The Ankou symbolizes the unavoidable nature of death in Breton culture. There are, of course, many other figures and characters throughout history in other religions and mythologies that represent death. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but those listed here have many of the traits that are shared in common with the Grim Reaper. Over time, Christian beliefs, folklore, and artistic representations merged these different cultural influences, shaping the Grim Reaper into the figure we know today. The cloak, the skeletal form, and the scythe all became standardized in Western art and literature as symbols of death's inevitability and impartiality. The Grim Reaper, much like death figures in other mythologies such as Thanatos, the Dullahan, and the Ankou, embodies the inescapable nature of mortality. As a personification of death, he serves as a symbolic figure who neither kills nor causes harm, but rather guides souls to their final destination, similar to the role of psychopomps like Charon in Greek myth. Though his appearance clad in black robes with a scythe in hand evokes fear, the Grim Reaper represents the natural end of life, a force beyond human control or influence. Whether seen as a gentle guide or a chilling harbinger, his presence across cultures reflects humanity's universal confrontation with the reality of death, offering both a reminder of life's fragility and the certainty of its eventual end.